It was a day he turned to me to ask if I had the chance to type the manuscript, because he had written a book, and that was how we spoke to each other. I told him I was not able to write by typewriter, and that I would find somebody who was able to do that. And then I asked him, "So, well, Father Guido, what is the focus of a book?" And he told me, "It is about the origins of man and the original sin." And I was shocked by that, because I had been interested in it since I was a child. And so seriously, I told him, "But Father Guido, what is this original sin?" And he told me, "Well, it was a sin of hybridization of the species." And me, in a detached and quite arrogant tone, I said, "Don Guido, what are you talking about?" And he, who appeared stunned by my reaction, looking up to heaven, said, "Who told me that cannot be mistaken." And I told me, either this man is crazy, or this man has a big thing in his hands. Because how can a normal person say such a thing? Thus begins a singular story of prophecies and revelations that is stirring up a growing interest and dismay at the same time for its content. We are talking about a Venetian pious priest, Father Guido Bortoluzzi, who died in 1991 at 84 years old, and who wrote the content of some visions received over the years concerning the creation, the origin of man, and the original sin. All central and burning themes for theology, and partly also for science. All flew into the book Biblical Genesis, curated by Renzo Jacobi, the old-age confidant of Father Guido, who was a person, as he himself wrote, that had a life littered with particular and inexplicable marks. Which ones? Father Guido, he was still a child. We are in 1922. He was born in 1907, so he was young at the time. And Father Calabria, a mystic, came to visit this seminary. And by seeing all these little boys entering their classroom, he told the dean, he said, "This little boy," and said, "This little boy has a great task. He will have a great task, because the Lord will reveal him, he will have to write a very important book." And the dean asked him, "About what?" And he answered, "About the biblical Genesis, about the dark passages of biblical Genesis." And so the dean, was a little baffled. And Father Guido, who saw this Father Calabria addressing directly to him, was impressed by the speech. This was in 1922. 6 years later, we were in 1928 in this seminary of Belluno, because the seminary was divided in two parts by age. Father Matteo Cronley came to visit the seminary. He was a great mystic and also a man of great charismatic gifts. And in the chapel, where all the seminarians were reunited, he focused on a boy who was young at the time and attended gymnasium by saying, "He will reach the highest degrees of the ecclesiastical scale." And this little boy was Albino Luciani, the Pope. And then, staring into the eyes, Father Guido said, "And he will have a very important thing to do. He will have to write a book on Genesis, on the Bible, on the dark footsteps of Bible." And in so doing, he actually confirmed what Father Calabria had said.
Poi ci fu anche l'incontro con la mistica tedesca Teresa Neumann.
Then there was also the meeting with the German mystic Saint Teresa Neumann. Dont is a village on the top of Giordana Valley, and there he received the visit of Teresa Neumann. One day, this woman knocked on the door with a handkerchief on her head, speaking German. He spoke to her in German. He invited her to make herself comfortable, and thus she told him, You will have a great task. The Lord has one great plan of mercy for you, but you will also have much to suffer." He was shocked by that, but connected the three things. The book supports the thesis that the famous words of Giovanni Paolo I, Pope Luciani, about God, who is father and mother, somehow relied on Don Guido's visions. Isn't it such an arbitrary link? They had had the prediction at the same time and had been witness to one another. So Albino Luciani, after becoming a priest, made also a career, an ecclesiastical career. At that time, he was bishop in Vittorio Veneto, and then was made patriarch in Venice, and returned to Vittorio Veneto to hold a day of retirement for all the priests. At that point, Father Guido had already had some of the revelations and approached him to say, "I have some important things to clarify, to share. However," he said, "there is no material time. I wish you to come back." He said, "I would like to come back to you, because I have to say something to you very important. God revealed to me the creation of man, and God is truly father and mother for the man. Because, as I will say later, God had created both male and female gametes that made up the first cell of the first specimen that was Adam. So Adam did not have ascendants, I mean in the nature of the living beings, because father and mother for him were actually a new creation. When then Albino Luciani became Pope, evidently he was believed Father Guido, because he knew that he would have had some revelations, and he gave a testimony to Father Guido, and he said in a wider sense that God is father and mother in a spiritual sense too. So it was a very beautiful thing that Father Guido appreciated a lot. But how did the birth of man take place according to Father Guido's revelations? The report of these visions, which he had in old age, has a complex and meticulous photographic character, even scabrous at first glance. In brief, God would have inserted a male gamete and female gamete, a spermatozoon and an ovum, into the uterus of an ancestral female, that is, of a pre-existing species extinct today. Thus, the cell from which Adamo will come out originates. And that is an example of artificial insemination of a rented uterus, without contamination between ancestral species and human species, because through the placenta, as everybody knows, genetic characters do not pass, but only nutritional elements. And that same ancestral uterus would then host the embryo of the first woman, but this time resulting from the union between Adam's semen and a new ovum, a dog created by God. The first perfect couple was done, but then the original sin came. Adam wants to engender children out of God's plan. From that, the hybridization of the perfect human species, and ancestral, inferior and imperfect, and the birth of CAIN, the key of mystery, as written on the cover of the book. Of course, because his birth represents the origin of a hybrid offspring that God would never have wanted. He had created perfect sons, and he, Adam, was instead at the halfway point between the ancestors and the man. Adam looked exactly like the ancestor, with dark skin, dark reddish skin and body hair. And later, when he had his children and had them with that same female who gave birth to him and who was genetically compatible with him, naturally gave rise to a compromised offspring, both intellectually and physically. Adam's original sin was just that, a sin that was not only a sin of pride, arrogance and presumption, but also sin for Adam's will of dissociating himself from God and of being himself the creator of life, feeling God. And that sin practically took place in a concrete act and led to the death of the pure species genetically, biologically and also spiritually. Because, as the Mosaic Genesis says, God withdrew His Spirit from these beings that were not perfect, neither intellectually nor physically. Now, after the regression of the species caused by Adam's sin, which therefore had biological consequences, as Benedict XVI said a few months ago, at what stage we find ourselves now, and the arrival of Christ, what actually brought of different? Man was not created, as scientists say, a few million years ago. But in truth, he was created between 40 and 50 million years ago, at the end of the creation of large mammals. So we are in the late Eocene, and the human species has disappeared as a pure race, as a pure species. Because humans have been camouflaged themselves among the other species. Therefore, the anthropologists are not able to distinguish them from other beings that are not human, because they were like animal species in every way, and they had been remained in this undergrowth for millions of years. Then, with the universal deluge, God made a real genetic purge by eliminating those branches that were genetically irreversible, keeping only the purest one. The purest branch started from Noé, even if he had himself a wife who was not pure, but partially hybrid. Nevertheless, he gave rise to all mankind. So history and anthropology know this part of our history and do not know the previous one. God has always evolved man. Now we are in the phase of re-evolution, because with CAIN we moved towards an involution. Now we are moving towards a re-evolution, but we are far from the original perfection. With the fullness of time, as Jesus calls it, that is when humanity was capable of understanding and willing, and therefore sufficiently able to receive the redemption, Jesus came to take this big step. And in so doing, he gave man not only a spiritual law, which overcame that of Moses, which was the first foundation, the first important escape from this subjection of the instincts. But he also gave us a very important thing, that is the Eucharist. The Eucharist, in truth, is nothing but a transfusion of divine blood in the human weakness. It is the antidote to the consequences of the original sin. Original sin has brought into the human race all the animal instincts, not only the sexual one, let's say unbridled, but also all the instincts of abuse of power, of exasperated possession, of competition. So all the instincts that are not made for the children of God. While Jesus explains to us which are the requirements of the children of God. And we find that in the Beatitudes, which is a passage that goes beyond the 10 Commandments. I mean, everything is positive. It does not say, don't do that, don't kill, don't steal, but it says, blessed are the meek, blessed are the just, blessed are those who have the Spirit, even if minimally, but they have it, because God gives Himself and the Spirit to those who are in the image and likeness of God. This book lacks an ecclesiastical imprimatur, which is permitted by canon law. However, do you not feel the need to have an authoritative judgment of the Church? I certainly feel this need, and it seems to me something that will undoubtedly happen, because it does not really contradict our Catholic faith, and not even the Jewish one, and I do not even think the Muslim one, even though I do not know it very well. But rightly, Church goes with great prudence. These are very big things. Here we have the union of faith and science, that is reason, that meet for the first time with concrete things on which it is really possible to build a common thinking. Finally, let's return to Father Guido. Is it true that he even saw in a vision the Vajont tragedy? Yes, it's true. In 1945, Father Guido hadn't had any revelation yet. He was still a young boy, in short, a young priest, and he was chaplain in Casso, a village that was later hit by the Vajont flood catastrophe. And there he had a prophetic dream. So he saw all the tragedy of Vajont, the landslide that broke off Montauk, the water leaping over the dam, descending in a zigzag on the plain until the plain of Longarone that wiped out much of the village. And he was so shocked by that because he saw it in the particular details. He wanted and tried to sensitize parish priests and mayor. But at that time, there were neither the dam nor the project of the dam yet, so no one took him seriously. And from there, he began to be known as a visionary who, poor him,